All right, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will not be answering questions from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of Bruce Lee non-drug letters, and lots of, hey bro, just writing to you as a friend. Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Sifu. I'm hanging in there, man.
Yeah, barely hanging in there,
Yeah,
right?
man. Been up.
You been up? Yeah,
Been
that's
up.
right. You've been living that hard life lately, huh?
I forgot to get a coffee. I'm like,
Oh, man,
gee.
that's rough. I can't survive without my Cuban coffee.
Ooh.
Yeah,
And
this
you
morning.
know I can't live without my Cuban coffee.
This morning I did. We have the monthly Q&A class, which you have a subscription for. It's at citywingchun.com.
Yeah.
You can get a monthly subscription to do my live online Q&A class, which is if you want to ask me technical questions about Wing Chun training, how to better do Pak Sao, how to better train this, that, the other thing. Once a month, usually the first Saturday of every month, I do a live. It's about an hour.
Yeah.
And for the first 10 or 15 minutes, I discuss a topic in depth. And then after that, that kind of gets the ball rolling, and everyone who's in the live chat can start asking me questions. And then that's basically the rest of the 45 minutes, which is just kind of
Been
answering
doing this
questions.
since the pandemic, too.
Yeah, yep. And so we're still doing
Big
it.
hit.
And so if that's something that people are interested in, you can definitely go to the citywingchun.com website.
And-
that's Wing Chun, by the way, TSUN, not CHUN.
And you can ask
yep.
Wing Chun questions.
Yes,
You
yes.
don't
So-
have to ask, like,
Yeah, like Bruce Lee cocaine questions or
Yeah,
something like that,
right.
right? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's like for people who really want like
Like,
technical stuff answered. Yeah.
yes, Wing Chun movement questions.
And I'm considering offering that also for some of the Patreons at a special tier, and maybe even here on YouTube for. But it would be the recordings of those. If you want to do the live, it's actually really cheap. It's like $12.99 a month,
Okay.
and you get access to the Zoom, and then you can go in and come in live and ask the questions.
Come in hot.
Yeah. If not, you know, there are other ways I can maybe put it on Patreon or YouTube, but you would then be watching the recording of it as opposed to participating in the live version. All right. So the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius is on Patreon. Patreon.com/the Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5 a month, you get access to episodes early. Higher tiers of support, you get all sorts of fun goodies, including the toppest, mostest levelists is the baller level. You can get a private episode with me, and it's basically the main line to get questions answered here on our podcast. If you don't want to support us on Patreon, you can also support us here directly on YouTube under memberships at the $9.99 level. You get access to monthly videos that I'm going to release, usually on topic of history or like deeper dive kind of stuff. And at lower tiers, like $3-4 a month or whatever, you can get your questions answered in the comments or get your questions answered in the episode. So anyway, that's the best
nice.
way to support us. So
Nice. Wait.
yes.
What we got going on today? You didn't
Yeah, so
do
I decided to do something a little bit
questions?
different.
Okay. Little shum diff.
So anyone who watched last week's episode, all right, may not know that last week's episode was recorded yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's
as I
right.
mentioned in last week's episode, which was just recorded yesterday, that because I was out, I was in Europe, I didn't have time to press my Patreons for some
such a
new
mind
questions,
trip,
right?
right? Yeah.
So rather than doing an AMA, because now I have to get up on Patreon and be like, hey guys, I need some fresh questions. I decided, you know, it had been a little while since we did like Bruce Lee related stuff. Because the Kung Fu Genius podcast, for as little successes we've had, our biggest successes have always been in the way of going
Bruce Lee related.
right?
Right.
And it's been a little while. And I thought maybe today we would discuss his letters.
Not the drug letters.
His non-drug letters, okay, this time here, all right?
Yo.
Yeah, you know how much I like drugs.
Yes.
Oh, man.
So, because as I mentioned a few times, in fact, a couple months ago, we did an episode on like the best Bruce Lee books.
Let me ask you, did Bruce Lee write an amorous adventure Bruce Lee book? Oh, no.
No, but man, how much would that fetch at an auction? The Amorous Adventures of Bruce Lee.
Oh, three-legged Lee coming in.
That's right. Yeah, Lee
Three-legged
Sambo,
Lee
right?
Rolling through.
although-
through.
There is a movie that might as well be called The Amorous Adventures of Bruce Lee. It was made after Bruce Lee's death, and it starred Betty Ting Pei, and where she plays herself. And I believe it's Daniel Lee who plays Bruce Lee. Some people know him from the
what?
movie The Killer.
What in the world is this?
Well, you know what's really strange about it is, and why I always, I mean, when you're not in someone's shoes, it's always really easy to be judgmental or whatever. But
of course.
After Bruce Lee's death, things got a little difficult for Betty. Her career was in a little bit of a lull at the time that Bruce Lee died. She was, I believe, no longer on contract with Shaw Brothers. She was trying to get into some Bruce Lee films while her late boyfriend was still alive. In fact, the way I understood it, or from what I understand, Betty was trying to get into the film Enter the Dragon. She wanted to have the role that was ironically played by another Betty Chung, who was the operative that was on the island.
So she wanted to get into Enter the Dragon by allowing the dragon to enter her?
Oh.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
This guy's an amorous
Jesus.
adventurer.
She wanted to get into Bruce Lee movies by allowing Bruce Lee to get into her.
Jesus. All right.
This guy. Well, that's this guy.
But it's that British humor. It's always dry and filthy.
You can't take
Wait,
him.
I'm just in the middle of
Can't
someone.
take him anywhere.
I'm just in the middle of something. Okay. Let's keep it above board, boys. All right.
We have tiny listeners.
Yeah.
Right?
So
guy.
Betty, she was quite. Her life didn't get easier after the king of kung fu died in her apartment because the speculation that she either had something to do with it, knew something, and wasn't speaking about it was obviously very high. And I think that without getting into any conspiracies, everyone knows that whatever Bruce Lee died of, for sure, Betty knows. And now, given that Linda will never speak about it, and Dr. Langford is long since passed, and Raymond Chow is no longer around, that kind of leaves Betty as like the final person who was kind of there, right?
Yep.
And after Bruce's death, her life as far as making films didn't really go very well. I think a lot of Hong Kong films looked at her as a bit of a black widow, even though she wasn't married to Bruce Lee. Like, she was just kind of cursed.
Damn.
She did, however, end up marrying Charles Hung, who's famously from Triad royalty. And that may also speak for the reason why she didn't really need to work that much.
Okay.
Because he, was...
I thought you were talking about the guy, the playwright.
Charles Hung?
What's his name? Yeah.
No, he's talking about the guy that's supposedly Bruce Lee's reincarnation.
Isn't it David
Yeah,
Henry David Huang?
Henry
David Huang. Yes.
David Henry Huang.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Man,
okay.
that's such a deep cut. We've been doing this podcast so long. I forgot. Like, that's season one bullshit.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where someone he was
I
like
miss
so
that guy,
he
though.
was so serious
miss
that he
him.
was like, "Yo, Henry David Huang is Bruce Lee. He had some plastic surgery and became a Korean playwright."
I thought she went straight to that.
No, not at all. So,
Henry David.
so she didn't really make that many films after Bruce. I think also she wasn't really invited to make many films, but she made a movie called Bruce Lee: His Last Days, His Last Nights, and it is.
What?
I actually
sounds amorous.
it is, and
What?
I actually have it on DVD somewhere. Oddly
His
enough,
last
it
days,
was
his last nights.
it's a bit of a it's more of a kind of a soft core kind of movie than a martial arts action movie.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, she stars herself, and she famously claimed that after Bruce Lee's death, her life was so difficult, she became a devout Buddhist, and she wanted to live a life of peace out of the limelight. That's what she says. On the other hand, Betty drove a pink Rolls Royce with the license plate Ting Pei. So like when you want to say you want to keep a low profile, but you drive not a regular Rolls Royce, but a pink Rolls Royce with your name as the license on the license plate.
That's pretty low profile in New York City.
I tend to have some doubts as to whether the thing you are saying is the thing you want.
Yeah.
And on top of that, she made this movie called Bruce Lee's Last Days, His Last Nights, because she would get, from what I understood from some interviews you can see from the 70s, she'd get a little salty when people would talk about these things. It wasn't something she liked to talk about in any kind of detail. But then she makes a movie which kind of completely panders to like all the speculation of their affair, which I think no one really doubted. But for someone who really didn't want to talk about that, she literally made a movie about playing herself having an affair with Bruce Lee.
Wow.
Okay, and him dying in the apartment.
this.
Yeah, And as a matter of fact, in some documentaries or some videos on YouTube, when they want to like reenact his death, where he's like getting sick and he's on her bed, they actually take those clips from that movie because they recreated that, right? So I'll have to go back and watch it and see if there was a
Do you have it?
if there was a Coke straw in the background. No, I have it somewhere. I have it somewhere in my DVD collection, which is in a box somewhere in my closet.
Gotcha.
Oddly enough, it's produced by Shaw Brothers, but Run Run Shaw seemed like he didn't really want his name attached to it because
so what did he do?
well, he created like kind of another production company that produced it and took the credit, but it's part of the Shaw's catalog because Shaw made it.
Okay.
And it's also very clear because Siu Yat Fu, Run Run Shaw himself, his Cantonese name is Siu Yat Fu, right?
Okay.
His bitter rival was Raymond Chow because Raymond Chow was his former employee who basically stabbed him in the back and opened his own, he was the upstart who opened his own studio and became his biggest rival. And Run Run Shaw did everything he could to bankrupt Golden Harvest because Raymond Chow knew like when the contracts were expiring with a lot of the actors at Shaw Brothers because he was working there. And he poached a number of actors, including and most famously Jimmy Wang Yu. And there was like a bitter litigious battle between Run Run Shaw and Raymond Chow about Jimmy Wang Yu, which is why he couldn't make movies in Hong Kong, and then they had to make some movies in Taiwan, and then like there was all this weird stuff, right? But in the meantime, Raymond had found Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee was essentially the guy who saved Golden Harvest, which is another reason why the whole idea that Raymond, despite the arguments and the problems he had with Bruce, would want to have Bruce Lee killed. He was literally the golden egg. Yeah. And at that point, you're basically printing money, putting Bruce Lee in a film. So the idea that he would want him dead because he's talking to Shaw Brothers seems kind of ridiculous. You want to keep Bruce, just offer him more money. The next movie he's going to make is going to earn it.
It just reminds me of the, I can't, and I don't want to touch on it. We don't need to touch on it. It just reminds me of something from back in the 90s.
What a tease. Are you talking some Suge Knight shit or what?
Diddy, Biggie.
Oh, yeah. I think you can't mention that name anymore. We get demonetized.
Now, you see, this actually more reminds me of Hendrix, right? Because,
Jimi Hendrix?
Yeah, Jimi Hendrix, because Jimi Hendrix died in his then girlfriend's apartment.
Was he leaving the label that he was working for?
No, but what happened very similar kind of to Ting Pei is like, this girl, her name was Monica Danman, and it was like he had lots of girlfriends at the time.
I can't imagine
that. He died after, I think, he overdosed, but like, again, took ages and ages and ages for her, like, his girlfriend to call like the ambulance, but he actually called Jimmy's like manager before she called the ambulance, right? And
wow, that's very similar.
Yeah, and by the way, like this is like Jimi Hendrix had two managers. He had Chas Chandler, who was the bass player in the Animals, and this other guy called Mike Jeffries. And Mike Jeffries was, by all intents and purposes, a very shady guy, right? Who magically disappeared 3 years ago in a plane accident that to this day has never been fully explained, right?
Oh, okay.
But she continued on living her life in the way that, she would feel like, Jimmy would want it just right, like making art for Jimmy and paintings for Jimmy and all this kind of stuff. And then about 20 years ago, another ex-girlfriend of like Jimi Hendrix is a British girl who by this point was married with kids. She's like a real estate agent. It's just like she was a wild person when she was like 18 in the 60s. And, like basically, that Monica Danman like kind of tried to like sue her for defamation because this woman had like said, I think you might be, like responsible for his death, and, so like the girl who was in the place lost the case. And then 2 days later, she committed suicide.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like fucking wild.
So I know what YouTube rabbit hole I'm going to go through tonight because I didn't know any of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting.
And I think I saw the Jimmy movie that came out.
The one with Andre 3000.
I think so.
Yeah, because the problem is that Andre 3000 would have made a great Jimmy. Well, he did make a great Jimi Hendrix, but his estate wouldn't let them use any of his stuff. So all the music is sound-alike stuff. There's not one original Hendrix song in there. So the film just kind of is like a pointless exercise because it's like, well, you're not going to get to hear or see him being Jimmy, right? You know what I mean? Because they're like, you know what I mean? Anyway, sorry, we digressed.
So, so Betty made this movie, and Run Run Shaw wanted to get back at his former employee. So in it, he has an actor who portrays Raymond Chow, and he just portrays him as just an absolute putz. and I guess because he didn't really want to get sued, he kind of had this kind of shell corporation that produced the movie. But later, when Celestial Films bought the Shaw catalog, that film was in there because it was actually a Shaw film, but it wasn't advertised as a Shaw film at that time, right? So
wow,
so a little weird that
through his catalog, like,
yeah,
what the
exactly.
What is this?
But also a little weird that, you know, Betty always says like, oh no, it's not about controversy or whatever, and then made like such a salacious film, right? So, but perhaps we should rewatch it and do a commentary.
Yeah, we may have
a live commentary, right?
Live with no prior.
Yeah, no research, no looking, nothing. Yeah. Just like, let's just watch it and like mystery science theater.
Off the cuff, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be fun.
By the way, if you guys who are watching the podcast on YouTube want like Dre and I, Mikey, like the three of us to do any commentaries on films where we can record the audio, we either put it up on YouTube, just the audio, or as a video to watch to a movie, like where you hear us just kind of clowning it, or something a little more serious. Let us know in the comments.
Yes,
which movies those would
prefer.
be. Yeah, and that'd be fun. So today, our long 20-minute introduction notwithstanding, I want to talk about Bruce Lee's non-drug letters. All right.
Hey everyone, just want to let you know Wing Chun Illustrated is now offering a paperback edition through Amazon, reaching a larger global market. And no, they're not ditching the glossy magazine edition through MagCloud. You can now simply choose the version of this magazine you prefer and the one with the cheapest shipping wherever you live. Order your copy of Wing Chun Illustrated today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping for Prime members. Go and check that out.
So I've mentioned in the past that of all the books about Bruce Lee, I consider this one here, which is Letters of the Dragon.
This is the one you learned the most.
It's volume 5 of the series that John Little did back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why I like this, and by the way, I like every book in that John Little Tuttle series, because it has his notes and it's just like the first time, because prior to that, you really only saw bits of his notes in Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and the rest of it were like some of his notes from the books that he had, read. When you look at the stuff that John Little published, I think this came out in the 90s. It was really the first time where you got to see more of Bruce Lee's notes and drawings and thoughts on martial arts and stuff like that. And the
how many volumes?
I think this one, number 5, I think it was just 5 or 6 or something, 6 at the most. I mean, I have them all here. I would have to look. Yeah, I think it's about 5. They've re-released them with different covers, and if you're a big Bruce Lee fan and you don't have Letters of the Dragon, do yourself a favor. Unfortunately, John Little doesn't really get much from these books, if anything, but they are they are what they are. They're pretty good. Yeah. Letters of the Dragon is my favorite of the group, and I love all the other books because it's just Bruce Lee writing letters to people that he knew. And so it's not like other Bruce Lee books, and not the other ones in the series, I just mean other books in general. Someone pontificating about Bruce Lee, someone's own spin, a JKD book written by someone from the LA Chinatown era who's going to tell you that all that is the best and everything that came before that he taught is shit, where everyone has their own little spin. It's just Bruce Lee writing letters to people. So you can read it and you can
get a better understanding of
what he was like.
And interacting with friends and all that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So again, it's like when you get to see what someone was like when no one was looking.
Yeah.
Then you get more of a character of their character.
Because letters are personal.
Yeah. And that's also why I love the Dan Lee phone interview that we reviewed in like the
episode 1,
right? Because Bruce, not to speak shady of the late Dan Lee, Bruce didn't know he was being recorded.
Damn.
And I later found out he wasn't
Dan
too happy
Lee.
about that because he was quite open. He kind of complained a little bit about Dan DeSanto in it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it is perhaps the only time that you get to hear Bruce Lee just like shooting the shit with a friend.
Right.
Because
Really cool.
the other time, like the Pierre Burton interview, that's a very polished Bruce Lee's in front of the camera.
Classy.
And the rest of it are movie clips and clips from TV. So he's reading a script. All right. But the Dan Lee conversation, and to a certain degree, some of the other interviews that we've done like the radio interviews, like the Ted Thomas one, and the Alex Ben Block one. Those are a little more like he knows he's being interviewed, but they're a little bit more conversational. But the Dan Lee one, and if you guys are Bruce Lee fans and you want to just kind of hear Bruce Lee shoot the shit, you can go on YouTube and type Bruce Lee, Dan Lee conversation, just listen to it, and you really get a feeling like how much he loved boxing and how much he knew about boxing and this, that, and you're calling Wong Jack Man.
Or they can just go to first episode.
Or you can watch our first episode and then listen to watch the most unpolished version of this podcast. not the absolute polished turd it has become over 4 seasons, but watch us like totally not knowing what the hell we're doing.
Talking about bullshit artists.
Right? So that was really great. And then
we did about 3 volumes of that episode.
I think so, to get through everything. So what I decided to do today is actually go through some of Bruce Lee's letters and discuss them a little bit. Read maybe parts of them and discuss like a little bit of the context, some stuff that I know. This is also the reason why, because I had read these letters so many times. Wow. And I had seen his handwriting so many times, including his more formal handwriting, and then his off-the-cuff scribble scrabbles. Because like when you look, I have a very photographic memory, and so I had just seen his handwriting. So we know Bruce had amazing penmanship. For someone who basically flunked out of school, he had the penmanship of a Greek god. But when he was writing quickly, or he was writing, like scribble scrabbles on the side, he had, like everyone else, very sloppy handwriting. And this is the reason why when the drug letters came out and we looked at them, anyone, John Little or me or anyone who's like, look at this, we're like, yeah, those are obviously Bruce Lee's letters. But of course, with the internet, the problem is when some information comes out that people don't like, it's faked. And it becomes
forged letters.
Now it's not to say that there's not tons of fake shit on the internet regarding Bruce Lee, but a lot of people have this reaction because it's like, I don't like what this means about my perception of Bruce Lee, so it must be fake. And then it's like, well, where's the evidence that it's fake? Well, Bruce Lee wouldn't. So you knew Bruce Lee personally, right?
Yeah, right.
The thing is that the major biographers, Matt Pauly, John Little, Steve Carriage, all 3 whom I've had on this podcast, all of them were like, oh yeah, those are legit. All right, because it lines up with the daytimers. The handwriting is the same. And there's some people who say, oh no, look how sloppy his handwriting is here. Everyone knew that Bruce Lee had perfect penmanship. Look you can see his sloppy scribble scrabbles when he's writing really fast. It's exact same stuff. Damn. All right. And then someone like, oh, there was some in there that didn't look at all like his handwriting. Oh, you mean like the ones that Linda Lee herself wrote on the backside? And she's saying that it's Linda? Yeah, that was not Bruce, that was Linda. So the idea that, it's kind of ridiculous, right? So, so that's the reason why I kind of find this one of the best of all the books. Now, this has his letters from 1958 until the last letter in this book is the day that he died, 1973.
So letters going back to when
since he was 18.
He left Hong
just
Kong?
About the time he's leaving Hong Kong, right? So it's basically more or less the Bruce that we've all seen, right? And what's amazing is how prolific of a letter writer Bruce Lee was. Obviously, well, I mean, think about it. There are 50 letters alone just for the drugs. Yeah. In a time span of like 5 years.
Okay.
All right. Because kiddos, this was the day. These were the days before emails. And so you wrote and it's funny. I remember when I was younger, every once in a while, writing letters and stuff like that. But I more or less grew up in the age of emails and stuff. And there was something kind of cool about when someone wrote you a letter and then it came in the mail. And then, like, the anticipation of it and all, there was something kind of nice about that. And I miss that a little bit.
Those days are over.
Yeah, like a nice old school handwritten letter is kind of a very nice thing.
It's funny going through your, like, shoe boxes and finding stuff that you wrote or you got from people. And you're whoa.
Yeah, crazy. Whoa. Older versions of oneself, right?
So wild.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to kind of go through some of this. What's interesting is you see when you read them, and the different life phases Bruce Lee was in. Like when he first came to the States and he was struggling. He was a struggling student. He was struggling to earn money and teach and get his footing. And then when he's starting to really get into developing his martial art. And then when he starts to get into I need roles in Hollywood, to I'm going to make movies. And then you start to see that really late in life, he had some letters back to his students in the States where he's talking about martial arts. But for the most part, the letters in the last period of his life are like about film contracts and TV and making movies and things like this. And you can start to see
Aspiring
you
stuff,
can, you can start to see his focus change. Which is why when we get questions about like, did Bruce Lee abandon Wing Chun at the end of his life? And it's kind of like, Bruce Lee didn't really talk about any martial arts stuff in that time period when he was in Hong Kong. His focus was making films, getting things signed, getting things done. It didn't mean he wasn't doing that. But if you're looking at it as a researcher, and you want to know what was the development of Jeet Kune Do in 72 and 73, the last year and a half of Bruce Lee's life. You really can't say, because he was making movies and he was perhaps more concerned with how his martial arts looked theatrically on film. It doesn't mean he wasn't still practicing his art. Absolutely not. When we went to dinner with Wan Kam Leung Sifu in Hong Kong last year, he was telling us about going to Bruce Lee's house in Kowloon Tong and seeing all the training contraptions he had for his speed and reflexes and kicks. So we absolutely know that Bruce was still fanatical about his own training as a martial artist, not just the stuff for the film. But we can't say for sure, well, what were his thoughts on Paxao in 1973, for example, right? And you can see here in the letters that kind of change. Wow. Now, it didn't mean, like I said, that he didn't think about it at all, but it wasn't the main focus of his letters at that point. So I want to start with a letter from in 1960. So Bruce had been in the States about a year by this time, maybe a little bit longer. Maybe about a year and a half. May 16th, 1960. All right.
That's wow.
And this is to Hawkins Cheung. Hawkins Cheung was Hawkins Cheung was a Wing Chun and high school classmate of Bruce Lee. So they both went to St. Francis Xavier's together. In fact, in the group class photo at St. Francis Xavier, you can see Bruce Lee and you can see Hawkins Cheung in there. And they were also classmates in Wing Chun under Yip Man.
Who started first? Do you know?
I believe Bruce Lee started before, but I don't know. I could be wrong on that. Hawkins very well may have started before Bruce. Hawkins later moved to the States and he taught Wing Chun in Los Angeles. So I know a few students of Hawkins Cheung, and I cannot remember his name right now, but you remember Seinfeld.
Oh yeah.
You know the guy who did he played Jackie Childs, who was like the Johnny Cochran lawyer.
Yeah.
That guy was a student of Hawkins Cheung. He's a big Wing Chun guy. As a matter of fact, on Instagram.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes.
Wow, he's funny.
He's super fun. For whatever reason, just his name is like totally escaping me right now.
Yeah, I can never remember his actual actor name, but yeah, Jack Childs.
Yes, and he's weird. I can remember his character's name on Seinfeld, right? He learned Wing Chun from Hawkins in Los Angeles, and he just did on his Instagram channel. He just did an interview with Sifu David Peterson. So yeah. So he's like a big Wing Chun head. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we should see if we can get him on KFG.
Amazing.
I would love to get him on KFG. That would be awesome.
Be totally awesome, right?
Yeah.
So anyway,
to say his line about, of all of my humiliations, this is the latest.
Wow. So let's read this here. This is really interesting because again, this is a private letter. All the letters in here were private. They were not meant for public consumption. All right.
Amazing.
Now, this letter is written in English, or I should say, it's printed in English in here. I suspect.
So he wrote this to someone.
He wrote it to Hawkins Cheung. But I suspect that the original one he wrote in Chinese. I suspect that this is a translation.
Okay.
I although Hawkins could obviously speak English, and Bruce could speak English, obviously, by 1960. Yeah. I've seen copies of the letters he wrote to Wong Sun-leung. Wong Sun-leung did not really speak English, and those letters were in Chinese. I would assume Bruce also wrote to Hawkins in Chinese, but I don't know that because it's a printing in this book, and it's just in English.
I suspect, and everything.
If any of our hardcore Bruce Lee fans out there know whether perhaps you're a student of Hawkins Cheung, if you know whether this letter was originally written in Chinese and then this is a translation or it was written in English, I would love to know that. So anyway.
Okay,
Yes.
but my question: the original letters, they sent them. Of course, Bruce Lee mailed them out. So someone had to acquire all of them, and for the estate, and they made these.
I think they probably contacted people that Bruce Lee knew,
Bruce
and
Lee
if
knew.
they had it, they just
they gave
made a
him
copy
letters,
of it. Yeah.
yeah.
Made a copy of it. I don't know.
Really cool.
That'd be actually a good question for John Little.
Yeah.
Because obviously these letters, in theory, should not be in Bruce
they
Lee's
send-
possession.
exactly.
Right? Because
They
these are
send
letters
out
that were
all over
everywhere.
the
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
But in the case of like the letters Bruce Lee wrote to William Cheung, not Hawkins Cheung, William Cheung. William Cheung like reprinted those in his books. He was very proud of having that, as anyone would be. And so some of them you can actually see the original like handwritten ones and stuff. And I think the one that he wrote to William Cheung was in English. But William Chung also lived in Australia. So the thing is, this Hawkins Cheung letter very well could have been written in English originally. But I would like to know. That'd be very interesting. All right, so here we go.
All right.
May 16th, 1960. Dear Hawkins, I see that I'm in your bad books through negligence in writing to you and do not know how to apologize sufficiently for the neglect. First of all, Hawkins, I must thank you for your welcome letter. So I assume this may have something to do with him arriving in the States. I don't know the timeline of when Hawkins moved to the U.S., but I think it was a little bit later. I think it maybe was in the 70s or closer to the 70s. Hawkins, I'm really truly sorry about your sickness, but please do listen to me. It's no use to become nervous and fidgety. Remember that it won't help, but just de-improve the illness. So he's obviously very worried about his friend here. Hawkins, I hope you will be better soon. Meanwhile, take it easy. I admit that it's good to practice Wing Chun. To be perfectly frank, I practice quite a lot on it nowadays. The wooden dummy has been shipped to me from Hong Kong already. But as for you, I advise you to quit it for the time being and wait until you get better. So what's crazy, you really see someone who's like really worried about his friend. Yeah. By the way, shortly before Bruce Lee left Hong Kong, initially to come to the States, the story was, and I believe Hawkins Cheung told this story, that Bruce said to Hawkins that he wanted to teach Wing Chun when he went to the States. And then Hawkins kind of made a joke like, well, you don't really know enough Wing Chun to teach, because he basically was a Chung Q level student, right? Who maybe had learned some pieces of this and that here and there. But certainly not considered a qualified Sifu compared to even Wong Sonang or some of the other people, right? And so then Bruce had decided that he should learn some kind of fancy-looking kung fu to maybe fool the Westerners or impress them. And that's where he went to his uncle Siu Hon San. Siu Hon San was a graduate of the Jingwu Academy, where they taught all sorts of different martial arts. And he was also like a kind of small-time film actor, like a character actor who knew Bruce Lee's father from the entertainment business, right? And that's where Bruce learns like the stuff that he used in the what later became his audition for Green Hornet, but it was originally for Charlie Chan, where he's there and he's showing the difference of the Kung Fu styles. Like, this is a crane form, and and he does all that thing. That was like his standard spiel when he wanted to show other Kung Fu. And those are basically the movements that he learned from Uncle Siu shortly before he left for Hong Kong. And the joke was that he had promised to teach. Now he calls him uncle, not because he's his actual uncle, but it's kind of like how the Cubans, everyone is your cousin. You know what I mean? It's like if
he's like an elder.
Yeah, it's like an avuncular character.
Yeah.
If someone is around the same age as your parents in Chinese culture, their aunt or uncle, like to be.
That's the same everywhere in England. It's like, Auntie Pat was the dinner lady. Like, they're not related at all, but like my known family for ages. Like, oh, you're going to see your Auntie Pat or your Auntie Grace, and it's like. Yeah, she's just the person that, she's the Green Cross Code person, you know what I mean? It's like whatever. Like, no relation. Anyway, carry on, please.
Christ, this elitist kind of British shit right here, right? She's just the help.
What a jump! I mean, yes, but what a jump!
Awful.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's kind of weird we have a colonialist on the podcast.
We do.
Here, all right?
We do.
We have an abolitionist colonialist. All right. Okay. So anyway.
Thank you very much.
So anyway.
Monarchist.
Yeah, so the joke is that he went to Uncle Siu and he had promised to teach Uncle Siu some of his cha-cha steps in trade for learning these forms. And the story was that Bruce picked up those kung fu forms really quick, ended up not teaching Uncle Siu any dance lessons, and then just like skipped and went to the States. and Hawkins apparently accompanied Bruce to some of these lessons with Uncle Chiu to learn the other kung fu stuff. But Hawkins apparently didn't have a lot of interest in it and kind of dropped out, where Bruce stuck around, learned a few of those things, which ended up being to his benefit because some of that stuff that he learned from Uncle Chiu creeped into his films.
Yes.
So do you know...
films and his interviews.
Well, demonstrations and stuff like that. But you know the scene from Enter the Dragon, where O'Hara comes to his door. He's like, "You must attend today's ritual in uniform," or whatever, right? He's like, "Outside," right? But before that, he's in there
He
like
does that kick.
He's well, not the side, but before that, he's doing a little kung fu form, and they film it from above, which is a really cool shot.
Yeah.
And you see him like jumping and kicking, and then he kind of kicks his knee, like he kicks like behind his knee and stuff like that. Like, that's the stuff he learned from Uncle Chiu.
That's the stuff.
So Bruce had some, even very early on, had somewhat of an understanding, perhaps because of his work in films, of like, oh, you need to know some theatrical stuff because Wing Chun's just for fighting, and like you have your fighting martial arts, and then you have your theatrical stuff, and he definitely got a lot of that from Uncle Chiu. And unfortunately, some of the Faulkner cultists have tried to pretend that that was some of the stuff he got from him. But that is really Uncle Chiu Honsang's influence, right? So to continue with this letter, he's like, at present, I'm still going to Edison High School and will be graduated this summer. I plan on going to the university next year, University of Washington.
Nice.
And so... kind of skipping around a bit. Now I will find out all those stuffs like Wing Chun, Cha-Cha are just for killing time and having a little fun out of it, and that study always comes first. Yes, that's right. Your own future depends on how well you have studied. It's funny because Bruce notoriously hated studying. He was an awful student. But when he came to the States, he basically flunked out of high school, more or less, or even if he's so-called graduated, he graduated like barely, but I believe he actually kind of failed out of high school. So when he came to the U.S., he couldn't go to university. He didn't have the credits and he didn't have the grades. So he had to go to Edison High School, but it was now what's Edison High School is actually a community college.
Okay.
So it was like he went there and then he did some classes and he had to get some credits so that he could qualify to go to university, because he didn't qualify just based off of his merits after St. Francis Xavier. I remember I had once seen like his transcript, I think from St. Francis Xavier or from LaSalle.
Okay.
And it said, it had his name and blah, 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 blah. And then at the bottom it said remarks, meaning like the remarks from the school, and it just said poor student. Oh, no. which is funny because when you listen to Bruce Lee speak, he was so erudite, he was so well-spoken for someone that English was not his first language, and he was speaking it more eloquently than many native speakers, and very philosophical and very cool. And you would think like, oh man, this guy was like probably top of his class, and he was like a flunking student. And then the other half of me says, yeah, and that's the difference between the old educational system and the new one. Like now, if you fail out of school, you're a legit, like, you don't know anything. Back then, if you failed out of school, you were still smarter than the average person who does well in school nowadays, right? So anyway, which gave me hope because I was also an awful student.
I was a terrible student. I was a great student until around 8th grade.
Yeah.
Then I became terrible.
Yeah.
I was lazy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I was.
That's fine. I have a kung fu podcast.
Yeah, I'm on a kung fu podcast. So.
Dre's a co-host. I'm right here. We're all just like it's the grayscale charts of mediocrity.
Terrible students. Yes. I love it.
So, he says, I didn't do much for my spare time except studying and practicing Wing Chun. Now and then a South American would come and teach me some of his terrific fancy steps and have mine in return. So, yeah, he really was big into dance, like trading the steps and all that kind of stuff, right? So anyway, I always thought that was kind of cool. Now there's another, here comes the next one, 1961, about a year later, to Ed Hart. Ed Hart was one of his first students, maybe even the third or fourth student. Ed Hart had a boxing background, and he was one of Bruce Lee's early guys and really, really good. Ed Hart died, I believe, in the 90s. Ed Hart was also one of the guys who taught one of my first, the lineage I came from, the non-classical Wing Chun in Seattle. That instructor had also learned from Ed Hart.
I see.
So kind of Ed Hart is part of like my old lineage, right? And I really liked Ed Hart moved from Seattle to New York City. He was in Brooklyn for a little bit, and then he came back to Seattle.
He was tired of Brooklyn like that?
No, I don't know. Maybe he was going for school or work or whatever. But this letter, I believe it's to Ed. So the reason why it's to Ed Hart while he's in Seattle is because Ed Hart is now in Brooklyn. So March 1961. Dear Ed, I'm sorry that I didn't write till now, as I was very busy straightening up my entrance requirements for the University of Washington. And now everything is all right. I'm being admitted for the spring quarter, which will start on the 27th of this month. Ed, we miss you very much here, because Ed is in New York, especially I for having lost a good writer. But of course, it's for our friendship that I really miss you most. Ed, do your best and save up some money and come back to us. So perhaps Ed had to go to New York for some money thing or had to help someone out or family member or whatever. Ed I eventually did come back to Seattle. He's buried, I believe, in Seattle, at least in Washington State, and obviously came back there and taught. So this New York move was never a permanent thing. We have given quite a number of exhibitions, and I have appeared on TV twice with Faulkner, the guy who magically taught Bruce Lee everything. Now, here's interesting. He appeared on TV twice with Faulkner. Now, from what I can tell, this footage, if this footage existed, it would be somewhere on YouTube.
You would have, and maybe you've seen it because there is.
No, Dre, I'm telling you, if there was footage of Bruce Lee on TV in 1961 doing a demonstration with Faulkner, this would be everywhere.
Yeah, but there's footage that was literally cut out of our life that we can never see.
Which one?
The telethon.
You mean in Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's for a different reason.
Okay.
And also that's in Hong Kong where they gave zero shits about preserving anything.
Right.
The Hong Kong Chinese, despite their very rich and traditional and ancient culture,
I see what you're saying.
Don't give a shit about pop culture.
Because it was in America.
Yeah, this was in America.
Was, in the archives.
So this would be on, I assume, Seattle TV. So it would be like Como or something like that, like the ABC affiliate over there.
Okay.
So again, appealing to our listeners here. If anyone's in the Seattle area, all right, I don't know if they kept this stuff recorded or what they did with it. And I find it very hard to believe that if someone was working for one of those TV stations in Seattle and came across an early demonstration with Bruce Lee, that they wouldn't have done something with it, all right?
Damn.
But if you guys are out there and someone has a connection... Cairo, I lived in Seattle for a few years, like Cairo, Como, it's like the ABC, NBC, CBS affiliates. Go ahead and see if someone there has this.
University of Washington is in Seattle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so it would be around 1961, early 61, late 1960. All right. Bruce Lee had 2 TV appearances. That would be gold if someone found that. All right. Interesting, Bruce Lee says here about Jesse Glover. Jesse is still the outstanding one among the students, though he is not so limber in the legs. All right, because he was formerly a judo guy, and you can tell even late in life, Jesse Glover was not much of a kicker, right?
Okay.
But people always say, "Oh, Jesse Glover was one of the best students of Bruce Lee, one of the most outstanding." People like, "Oh, well, that's just what people think." Bruce Lee literally says it right here.
Yeah,
all right, because Jesse's a very good fighter, really understood what Bruce Lee was teaching at that time. So really interesting, and that's why I love going through these letters, because where else are you going to hear Bruce Lee talking about his students but for his private letters to the other students, right? There would be he wasn't famous at this point. There's no avenue or need for him to discuss this anywhere else.
You know what would be cool? We found letters of Ashita Kim.
Yeah, to whom?
I don't know.
To himself, to his fake ninja grandmaster, right?
I love it.
So, and now here we come to something, to come back to a more old controversial topic. William Chung. So he wrote a bunch of letters to William Chung, all right? Now remember, at this point, William Chung was someone who he respected as a fighter, was someone who had a good fighting record in Hong Kong, was someone that I think Bruce aspired to be like or to beat or be as good as. And this is also before any of that story of a traditional secret Wing Chun style, because William Chung waited until both Bruce Lee and Yip Man were 6 feet under the ground before there was any kind of talk about, oh, by the way, all right, because you don't see anything in here like, oh, William, that's interesting what
Nothing
you said
implying.
about learning a different style from our Sifu, right? But of course, he had sworn an oath, and we all know teenagers and young men never give secrets away.
Abide to the oath. No.
So interesting. So William Chung was in Australia, and this is why I often say that William Chung and Bruce Lee it's almost like a little bit of a Greek tragedy. All right, they lived kind of parallel lives where Bruce came from a wealthy family, like let's say upper middle class family, and he was a bit of a troublemaker, and he found martial arts and got in some trouble with the law, and then had to leave and go abroad and become the Mang Long Guo Gong, the fierce dragon that crosses the sea, right? And he went to the States.
Right.
William Chung, kind of similar story, came from, he was not the legitimate son of his father. He was the son of the concubine, the side wife. But his father was an inspector, and in Chinese police inspectors had a little bit of money for various reasons.
then,
right?
yeah.
So William Chung was also, let's just say, from at least a solid middle class background, and also liked to fight and to get into scraps, and probably much to the chagrin and disappointment of his police officer father. So you can see that both Bruce Lee and William Chung actually had very similar stories, slightly different background, but
They probably just connected as
Yeah,
soon as
and
they
then-
met each other.
Bruce had to leave, and William Chung also had to leave around the same time. Bruce went to the States. William Chung went to Australia. So it's interesting because they both kind of like these parallel paths, right? And then one becomes like the undisputed king of Kung Fu cinema and like a legend, like up there with Elvis and all of this.
Amazing.
And the other one becomes a very famous yet controversial Wing Chun instructor. And
One of the more famous.
for sure.
of all
I mean,
of
say
them.
what you want about William Chung, but I mean, he's like one of the famous guys, right? Interesting. Chan Chi Man told me a crazy William Chung story once, because as we've discussed before, which is funny, which is why like when I did that episode talking about like William Chung's claims have like zero evidence, right? And people got all upset. It's like, I'm just saying his claims. I didn't say he wasn't a good fighter. I'm not saying anything about his style, because everything indicates that he was like a banger back in the day, right? But that doesn't necessarily excuse what he did and how he did it with a lack of evidence and kind of bullying everyone to create this false dichotomy and say, if you don't believe me, you're blah, 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 whatever, right? So, you're just some modified guy who doesn't want to accept the truth. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you need to accept that I'm the only person who did X, Y, Z. And if you don't accept it, you are blah, blah, blah. It's like anyone who makes a claim like that, who has to bully someone, you need to accept me or burn forever in hell. Everyone who makes that kind of claim it seems like their argument's a little weak. All right.
Damn.
Either it's true and there's a reason to believe it, and being punished or stigmatized for not believing it doesn't make the original claim true, right?
My way or the highway. That's
Exactly,
how it goes,
right? And kind of strange when it's like, well, I don't understand why people aren't more amenable to this, right? But one time, the late Chen Sifu told me that he was out and about with William Chung. And
Wait.
what?
Out partying or just out like
No, just
after
this out,
class?
whatever, like
Okay.
hanging
They're
out,
still
whatever,
teenagers,
right?
yeah.
And William Chung was someone who was like Bruce Lee, maybe kind of quick to anger and quick to get into a fight, somewhat hot-headed, and for whatever reason, they got into it with some boys, right?
Yeah.
And William Chung said something, and then suddenly, this like maybe it was a gang thing. There were a couple other dudes there. They start fighting, and Chan Chi Man is that he didn't really want to be in the fight. It's like kind of he's there hanging out with William Chung. William Chung's running his mouth with this guy, and Chan Chi Man's like, "Oh shit!"
I gotta fight now.
Right? And
because
then
of him.
there's a little bit of a melee, and they start running.
Okay.
All right, because now all of a sudden they're being chased by like a bunch of
outnumbered.
dudes. Yeah. And then he bumps into a cop.
As he's running.
Yeah, and William Chung bumps into a cop, and then the cop says something to William Chung. He's trying to tell, like, hey, slow down, tell me what's going on. And Chan Chi Man told me that William Chung looked at the cop and he's like, you want to fight? You want to go? like he was completely batshit crazy. And perhaps it's knowing that his father is a detective, so somehow he'll get out of trouble or whatever. But he said that William Chung was like, he was ready to fight the cop.
Yeah.
All right. So we're not talking about a venerable master of martial arts who's become at peace with himself. We're talking about some punk who wants to just get in fights, and he's not even swayed by the fact that this guy is a popo. All right. And so anyway, I mean, that definitely tells you something, right? Yeah. So anyway, they here is the first the first letter is October 30th, 1964. So I believe at this time Bruce Lee is in Oakland already. So he's left Seattle and he's now in Oakland, California. And it's a Dear William, our correspondence has always been like this, a mountain stream. It meets and parts. Anyway, I'm writing again after not too long an absence considering the previous length of time. So clearly they had like a lack of correspondence for a while, and now Bruce felt kind of bad, so he's writing a little bit more. And interesting because, nowadays you just send someone a text or send someone an email or hit them up on Instagram or send them some inappropriate meme through Instagram.
Yeah.
And that's how you keep up with it. Yeah. It's like, how I know Mikey is alive? Because he sent me five super inappropriate things today. That's why I know Mikey's still alive.
So inappropriate.
And, but back then it was
So
like,
true.
it was like, yo, you haven't written me a letter in like 3 months.
Oh.
And then it's like, it's all Janet Jackson. What have you done for me lately? Right? And then so.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's always what it comes down to.
The Janet
right?
Jackson theory.
And it's been a year since I'm back from Hong Kong because Bruce Lee had visited Hong Kong. And as you have noticed on this letter cover, I've moved from Seattle to Oakland, California. Okay, so I was right about moving to Oakland. It has been a few months now that I'm here, and things are coming along pretty good. At the present time, I'm taking courses from the University of California. That's interesting. I didn't know that. But I mean, I've read it before, but I've forgotten it. I'll be getting a degree in philosophy, which Bruce Lee would always joke, with a degree in philosophy, you can think deep thoughts about being unemployed. And then he makes that joke somewhere else. Actually, how are you getting along? I've met a few fellows while I was back in Hong Kong, and according to the different reports I've heard, I really don't know what to think. Also, I saw the twin brothers, one of them while walking along the Hong Kong street. Are they back to Australia? I have heard they are rather obnoxious. Hawkins is in Hong Kong now. So clearly in this last paragraph, he's referencing maybe some of their old classmates. I've met a few fellows while I was back in Hong Kong. But he doesn't say who. It would be so great to be like, who are you mentioning? Who are the twins? Does anyone know who the twins are that Bruce Lee is talking about? Maybe a William Chung student. Maybe you know the twins. All right, comment below. Nowadays, I indulge myself in reading and kung fu practice. I'm staying with a fellow who is also a nut in the Chinese martial art. This guy is really practicing. He can break a bottom brick without breaking the first one. Dib Mak, blood sport. And together we practice 2 hours. That's obviously James Yim Lee.
Okay.
And so it's kind of cool that he's like living with this guy who's also a nut and wants to kind of show like, oh, I'm hanging out with this hardcore martial arts guy. We have a nice gym built in the garage and my wooden dummy is set up. My partner has also built 2 other different dummies that prove to be of much use to Wing Chun form and method. We are in the process of completing some protective equipment for actual sparring without pulling punches. Hope to hear from you soon, Bruce. Think about it. In 1964, in the era of point karate and of if I would tag you, I would have killed you, Bruce is like, we need like full contact gear so we can do this. Nice. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And when people are talking about Bruce Lee wasn't a real fighter, it's like, dude, in 1964, tell me how many stateside traditional martial artists, not talking about boxing, not talking about wrestling, because it's so easy now to go like, oh, boxers have been doing all this stuff. Yes, in hindsight, with your hindsight bias, now that mixed martial arts includes these other elements of boxing and wrestling, we're talking about 1964. You have to always judge people in the landscape of the era that they came from. Yeah. All right. Otherwise, you would say, yo, Helio Gracie sucks at jiu-jitsu because Gordon Ryan would submit him in half a second. Yeah, I mean, you got to look at people in their context, who they were fighting at that time. Yeah. What was the general zeitgeist of martial arts at that time, and who were the innovative guys? For someone who came from Chinese Kung Fu to be like, yo, we need like full contact sparring equipment so we can really do this in 1964. Yeah. This guy was ahead of his time, okay? And say, oh, he wasn't a real fighter. Yeah, tell me all these other karate guys who were looking for full contact gear at that time to really go for. Maybe outside of Kyokushin, not too many, all right? So anyway, that was
Innovate.
kind of that was the first letter in this book. Obviously, he's written other letters to William Chung as well. But now what's interesting, and I remember talking to Big Sean about this other letter. This letter, because we don't see what William Chung's answer was to Bruce Lee. But now when we see the next letter, we see that there was some shit in William Chung's answer to Bruce Lee that Bruce Lee was like,
Hey.
hold on a second. All right? Now, mind you, he also wrote William Chung a letter later in 1969. We're still in 1964 here. So it's not like shit got weird, like that they never talked. But there was, this first letter here was October 30th, 1964.
Okay.
The next letter is November 21st. Which is
Okay.
funny. Like, look how
Almost
serious
a month,
people
like
were about
20
writing.
days.
Bruce wrote this letter, sent it. William Chung already wrote it back. Then he already sent one back. And this
Yeah.
is going from the U.S. to Australia. So,
Right. Takes
so
time.
yeah. So,
About
but that also meant like
week,
at that time,
perhaps.
not just for Bruce Lee, but I think for a lot of people at that time, like taking time to write letters and correspond
Yes.
was kind of a normal and important thing. Like we can't even imagine. We're so
It's
undisciplined.
equivalent to texts.
Yeah, but nowadays
But-
it's so undisciplined.
Yeah, it's
Hey,
no
how you going?
yeah.
Like what? You know what I mean? So now, let's read the second letter to William Chung about a month later, which is responding to William Chung's answer, which we
don't know
unfortunately
what it is,
don't
right.
have here. So we have to kind of fill in a little bit, right? Okay, posted from Oakland,
Should be a
California.
book written letters to Bruce Lee.
Yeah, hey, Linda, do you still have
Yeah.
the letters?
Let's
from-
get those
Yeah, I want to
letters.
get some of those. Like,
Yeah.
I want to see some of the
Letters to
answers
Bruce
back,
Lee
right?
and then cross-reference them.
Okay, so here we go. Dear William, your letter is kind of stressing doubt on our friendship. I don't wish to write you to have you think that I am writing for Kung Fu information. I'm writing merely because I want to write to you. Please do not stress on the need, as you mentioned in your letter, on my part for your opinion. Of course, you helped me while we were in Hong Kong, and I'm grateful. But please write to me as a friend, not as one who has all the answers, which I'm sure no one has. These are facts I'm putting down, and I'm not trying to be disagreeable. Now, that's the opening paragraph. All right. Now, what's interesting, all right, given what, now look, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not even going to pretend to be, but, you know, whenever we kind of like pontificate on what's going on from a psychological perspective, right, look, I have no training.
We weren't there, but
We have no I'm not trained in any kind of social work or anything like that. But we're still humans who've been around for 40 some odd years.
Yeah,
And
we've been through
anyway,
some shit.
it's always the people like, well, you're not qualified to do that. Like everyone speculates on what's going. It's how humans work.
It's
When you read
automatic.
something like this, you have to fill in the blanks. Now you can be wrong with lots of biases, cognitive biases, right? But given how William Chung later positioned himself as the sole inheritor of the true Wing Chun style, which only he learned from Yip Man secretly when no one was around. Let's just assume, what kind of person would want to do that if it was real and if it was not real? I think both do not say anything good about William Chung. Imagine if we take William Chung's story at face value. He did inherit a super secret style that Yip Man didn't want to teach anyone, not his sons, not Wong Sun-Leung, not any of these guys who were fighting for him, just this one teenage kid who pieced out and left and went to Australia. And then Yip Man was like, well, I taught it to one guy, so I won't teach it to anyone else for the rest of my life. Okay? It's okay. Like, what if William Chung had died in a boat accident? Now, oh shit, Yip Man is going to have to very quickly give someone else his style.
Quick.
None of it makes sense. But let's pretend. Let's give it face value.
Okay.
All right. After Bruce Lee died and after Yip Man died, okay, imagine you're William Chung.
Gotcha.
Bruce Lee dies, Yip Man dies, and you know that you're the sole inheritor of a Wing Chun style that is the real one.
Yeah.
Would you then go on blast and be like, hey guys, I'm the only one who learned the real one? Because here's the thing, even if it were true, if you're a human being with a modicum of intuition, you would go, I don't think this is going to go over well.
Yeah, that's kind of foul to everyone.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, even if it were absolutely true,
Right.
because William Chung claimed that he was the sole inheritor of the entire style. And then later, well, it's traditional Wing Chun that I'm the inheritor of. All right. But read the old letters. I mean, if people think that I'm going overboard with this, just read the letters from the early 80s that he wrote. I'll sit back. Just read them. Okay. And
Man.
if I were William Cheung and I had inherited a super secret style from the old man, and I was sworn an oath not to teach it to anyone until he died or whatever the hell the story was. And then Bruce Lee dies, my uber famous Kung Fu classmate, my Sifu dies. And now I'm here, I'd be like, maybe it's time for me to teach this style, but maybe go easy on what I say it is. Because maybe people will look at me a little like, oh, really? The story sounds a little convenient. Oh, really, dude? All right, that was your boy Delia before he got popped for being weird. All right, so anyway. Oh, really, dude? All right, so now imagine the story is fake. Imagine a universe where it's not a true story. Would you maybe think, this is kind of a bit of a far-fetched story, and maybe other people are not going to just swallow it wholesale? But then you either decide like, no, I'm just going to dig in my heels and say it anyway, right? But what kind of person would make the claim if it were true or if it were false? It would take a certain, like, I'm the dude. And now I'm not claiming to be a psychologist, but now we're reading a letter.
That would fight a cop.
Yep. And now we're reading a letter from 1964.
Okay.
And if we go back to the previous letter, literally all Bruce Lee said was, hey, I saw a couple guys in Hong Kong from our old days, which implied that Bruce Lee had gone back to Hong Kong, where William Cheung maybe had not, and maybe William Cheung maybe. This is all speculation. Could be totally wrong. Probably is. Maybe William Cheung was a little jealous that Bruce had even had the chance to go back and continue getting some Wing Chun education. So maybe now William Cheung isn't sure, like, oh, maybe Bruce has learned even more now. And then he talks about, oh, I'm hanging out. I'm living with this guy who's a total kung fu nut. He can smash and bot a brick and do all this kind of stuff. And
William
we're
Cheung
making
is like,
and oh, I got this
he's
new
not better than me.
and I'm training with other dummies, which are also helpful for Wing Chun. And we're coming up with sparring equipment. That's literally all he said. He didn't say anything like, oh, I think what I'm doing now is better than what you were doing. Or I think it's better than Wing Chun, or I think it's better than this. He's just saying like, hey, this is what I'm up to.
Yeah.
And you know, it's
This
like
is sharing.
when you know if someone is your boy, by like if you tell them what's good in your life, they should feel good about it and be like, yo, man, that's fucking amazing, man.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. Or if they're like, and it kind of seems that the letter in between, that William Cheung was kind of a little bit like, so you're hanging out with the martial arts now? No, oh, you have dummies that are different from the Wing Chun one, but they're still good for Wing Chun. Oh, you went back to Hong Kong? Oh, you're coming up. Like, and it maybe seems that he was like, but I'm the seeing, and let me tell you what's what.
Damn.
And wrote a letter in that tone. Man, if there was a piece of memorabilia I want to own the damn letter that William Cheung wrote to Bruce Lee in between these two, because I think that would tell us loads.
That would be a great letter to see.
And then, Bruce is like, your letter is kind of stressing doubt on our friendship, which kind of seems like William Cheung took what is essentially innocuous comments about what's going on.
Choice of words, too.
Yeah. And then like, I'm not asking you for Kung Fu information, because it's a little hard for Westerners to understand who have not learned from a traditional Chinese Sifu, because they're like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. Why would you be like that? You have to understand Chinese culture. You have to understand Chinese culture in the context of learning martial arts. And you have to then dial it back 40, 50 years to it's a little more conservative than it would be now. And trying to low-key get information from your seniors about the style seems like, unless you're really, really good friends with them, like you're trying to take advantage of the relationship. So if you went out to eat with your Sifu and you were asking your Sifu a bunch of questions about like, about the bong sound, about this, your Sifu, this is very general, may feel like you're trying to get info off the clock. When he just wants to sit and eat, and it's like, and now you're here. You can pay for a private lesson if you want, right? And so he's kind of saying like, I'm not trying to get Kung Fu information for you. In a way that in the modern era, if you were talking to one of your Sihings and ask them, they'd be like more than happy to tell you all this stuff.
Right.
But we have to look at it in the context of Chinese culture, in the context of learning martial arts, and then you have to dial it back 50 years. Okay, that this was like maybe considered somewhat inappropriate when
Taboo.
Bruce Lee, in his previous letter, wasn't asking William Chung for any information. He was just telling him what's going on in his life. And it seems like William Chung took that as an opportunity to say, oh, well, let me tell you what's what. And Bruce is kind of like, no. And then he's like, these are facts I'm putting down, and I'm not trying to be disagreeable. Please write to me as a friend. But you also then have to imagine William Chung is Bruce Lee's Siheng. And whatever happened and normally in traditional Chinese culture, you're very respectful to your Sihengs. Whatever had happened or was written in that letter in between was so much that Bruce Lee, the junior, had to be like, write to me as a friend.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want this kind of weirdness.
Yeah.
Then at the end, he writes like, things are getting pretty good here in California. So he quickly kind of changes, switches it up.
Switch the tone.
That he telling him that he got married and she's a real straight A student, and blah blah blah. Oh, and the book you read is a basic book. I've written something in 1963, and I'm in the process of completing a much more thorough book on the Tao of Kung Fu, because after Bruce's basic book, and maybe he had sent him the Philosophical Art of Self-Defense, that first book that he had published. Maybe he sent it to him or something like that. And then William Chung had to give him his comments. And in that book, Bruce shows a lot of stuff that's not Wing Chun. So maybe William Chung looked at it and was like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing? Because it's a book about Kung Fu. It's not a book about Wing Chun.
Right.
And then Bruce had plans to write a bigger, deeper book, like Nishiyama's book, Karate, The Art of Empty Hand. Oh, which reminds me, I do not own that book. I should get it. Because it would have been a book that Bruce Lee was like, oh, I want to write a book like this one here. So I'm going to try to get, and because this is how geeky I am, I'm going to try to get an early 60s copy of Nishiyama's book, Karate, The Art of the Empty Hand. And my wife and I are planning to take a trip to Hong Kong next year. That is, if I can make it. It will be nice if you can go too. I bet it would be difficult to get a government job for a few months, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, there was like a little bit of weirdness there. Oh. All right. Now, again, can only speculate, but, weird, right? What do you think about that? It's kind of like, how would you feel if you had to write a letter to one of your Sihengs where you're like, yo, bro, just talk to me like a friend, okay? Don't come at me like,
why are you coming at me like that, man?
Yeah, don't come at me like that, right? I'll read. I wanted to actually, I had marked a few letters in here.
Are we getting his segment in?
Not today.
I think that segment is better for AMA episodes rather than in the middle of a Bruce Lee letters episode, right?
Yeah, this one's been a little more serious and kind of like topic based. I think.
Yes.
I think the amorous adventures of Ashita Kim will somehow lower the tone.
And people be like, hey, great episode, but that was kind of weird at the end where you just started talking about jade stems and moistness.
Just speculating.
Just speculating. All right. I wanted, I actually had notated a number of letters in here, and I'm only about maybe halfway through because, I mean, each one of these letters we can talk a little bit about. They also have Bruce Lee's supposed last letter in here.
This is going to be a volume
I don't think
series,
so. I don't think so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read one more letter to James Yim Lee in 65. And then, then I think I can read the last one, and then I think we're good. Okay. Maybe if people are interested, let us know in the comments. I can look at some other letters because there's a lot of letters to Taki about Jeet Kune Do. There's a bunch of letters to Linda, which is like, when he was traveling or he wasn't around that he wrote to her. So I don't know how much of that stuff is super duper interesting for the martial arts things. I tried to pick a good cross section of that.
We'll see.
There's nothing wrong with doing a second part of it. You don't have to feel like you're rushing the end.
No, you don't.
Okay,
but
fine.
I think leave it up to the audience.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, fine then. I will just read one more letter. And then if the audience wants me to do more of this, including discussing Bruce Lee's controversial last letter written on the day he died, let us know in the comments.
No.
Yes, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, we cannot rush that.
And we can't rush that because there's some speculation that Bruce did not write that letter. And so let's let's maybe make Bruce Lee's last letter a separate one. If you guys want it, let us know in the comments.
I like that.
If you want me to do an episode on Bruce Lee's last letter he wrote or supposedly wrote, let us know in the comments and then I'll do it.
Right.
Okay, so before we go today, one more letter.
Are you a Wing Chun instructor that needs some extra guidance in your own training? My private online Wing Chun training offers a multitude of benefits for instructors. Here are some of those benefits. 1, access to expert guidance, namely me. With my experience teaching instructors from all over the world, I can create a program just for you, whether it's the details of the advanced Wing Chun, something more fundamental, or just to help you create a program for your own students. 2, flexible learning. The training can be worked around your schedule and what's most convenient for you. I don't charge extra if you bring a training partner to do the lesson with you, so bring that partner and you can get more benefit, and I can teach the two of you how to train together. 3, comprehensive curriculum. Whether you want to teach in a more traditional way or you want to upgrade your material to a more modern style, I can help you create the perfect program for your students and for yourself. And 4, personalized coaching. This program will be exactly what you're interested in without any fluff or blah, blah, blah to run things out. We get right to it, and I want you to be happy with the improvements to your training and to the curriculum. Don't miss out on these incredible benefits. Enroll in online Wing Chun private training with me and take your Wing Chun skills to the next level. Use the code KFG online to get a 15% discount on monthly subscriptions for either 2 or 4 lessons a month. This offer will last until July 30th, 2024, or until my schedule gets totally booked. Use the link in the description below. Don't forget to use the code KFG online to get that 15% discount on the subscription of your choice as soon as possible. And I will see you online.
Got it.
All right. And this is a letter to James Yim Lee, who was that nut that can break the bottom brick without smashing it. The Dim Mak from Frank Dukes' Bloodsport.
Wow.
Okay. Now, this was posted from Kowloon, Hong Kong on August 17, 1965, because shortly after Brandon was born, he went to Hong Kong with Brandon and Linda. Okay. And they spent some time in Hong Kong. And that's why you can actually see a photo of Grandmaster Yip Man holding Brandon, because that would be on this trip here. And then while Bruce Lee was in Hong Kong, wrote a letter to James Yim Lee back in Oakland. Okay.
Oh, nice.
August 16th, 1965. James, received your first aerogram letter. It was wise to use them when nothing is enclosed in. It's definitely much cheaper. Your elbow strike is good, but must be done after or on at the same time as the block by the right shoulder and left hand, and not in a horse stance, as 50% weight distribution on the front leg while the opponent's powerful sweep is dangerous. All right. So here we have Bruce, but of course the relationship between Bruce and James was, even though James was older than Bruce and had perhaps even been doing martial arts longer, James really respected the younger Bruce Lee as kind of the real deal. And here you can see him kind of telling him like why, like for example, Wing Chun people keep the weight in a little to the back a little bit more because you don't want to get swept by the front. And perhaps there was a photo or a drawing that James Yim Lee wrote. And let me see. Okay. Yeah. Then there's a photo in here, which of course for those who listen to us on audio, this is useless, where he seems to maybe kind of correct it a little bit, keeping the front leg light. In case someone sweeps you,
well,
right?
Andrew can show it for the people viewing.
Yeah, no, don't make Andrew work too much. I need to keep him for like the more major projects, right? Like, hey, Andrew, I really need you to edit this. So like, we'll keep the podcast editing very light.
You couldn't make him work hard if you tried anyway.
Mikey said that, Andrew, not me. So anyway, and then he's giving him some technical points there. Now, interesting. And the reason why I noted this one as a letter of note is that your description of the qualifications of certain students is right. Thus, knowing this, you yourself should build around their lacking, improve your power, speed, flexibility, general and mental attitude, confidence, killing instinct, no matter what style such basic requirements are necessary. So this is interesting because clearly James had some issue with a student coming in, perhaps someone with a certain martial arts background who was either good or dangerous or difficult to teach or whatever. The fellow you mentioned is a nice guy, basically. Try not to fool around too much half-heartedly in front of him. Now, here's a very interesting piece of advice. If you move your best as though not really trying. So he's kind of saying like, maybe try to impress this guy by doing something serious, but make it seem like you're not really trying.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a flex.
Effortless.
The sucker likes to criticize this and that. This goes for all onlookers. So it looks like perhaps James M. Lee had acquired a student who had previous martial arts training and is the yeah, but guy. When they're like, yeah, I'm going to learn from you, but every time you teach me, I'm going to have 50 questions.
Right.
Not in a critical way or not necessarily relevant, but just because I need to show you that I've done stuff before, right? It's like I feel lacking enough to learn from you, but not enough to not raise my voice every time you show something. And he's like, I'll answer your questions, but it's going to take you a really long time to learn.
Yeah, but...
Interesting that Bruce Lee wrote... that there are 4 basic requirements to being good at something in martial arts. Power, speed, flexibility, general, right? And mental attitude. Because in Chinese martial arts in general, this is not Wing Chun specific, although Wing Chun people use this as well. They have the so-called 4 requirements to make any technique supreme. Now, Bruce wasn't speaking specifically about a technique. He was thinking maybe more martial arts in general, maybe more attributes.
Okay.
But in the Chinese way, there's 4. And one is Fai, long, Zun, and Zhong, or Chung, heavy. So it's Fai is speed, which Bruce Lee says is number 2. The second one is long. Long is like aggressiveness.
Yeah. Mental.
And which could be part of that mental attitude, that like killing instinct.
Fighting spirit, yeah.
The other one is Chun. Chun means accurate.
Oh, yeah, because if you missing everything, you can hit and jit.
The 4th one is Zhong. Zhong is heavy. All right. Now,
Power.
it's very, those are kind of classically accepted in Chinese martial arts. Interesting that Bruce Lee's 4 are similar but not identical.
Same order.
So
either.
I don't know. Well, the order doesn't matter so much.
Doesn't matter.
But it's interesting that it seemed like these were kind of words that were in the zeitgeist, but maybe Bruce Lee either tweaked it, or maybe he had never heard it at all and just came up with 4 and they happened to be close. I mean, you practice this for a while. At some point, you're going to realize like it's not just learning moves. You also have to have the attributes to make those things work. Bruce had power and speed. In the traditional one, they have speed first. The power or the heaviness is 4th. So 2 of those they have. Mental attitude could be that long, that aggressiveness. But it's like the 3rd one that they disagree on. And I'm not saying Bruce Lee is changing it. He could have just come up like, hey, here are 4 things you need. Because the 3rd one is, for Bruce Lee, it's flexibility. And in the traditional Chinese one, it's accuracy. Now, in the Chinese one, to be fair, these are the 4 attributes that make a technique effective. And Bruce's are more like, these make you generally effective as a martial artist. So whether Bruce took these 4, changed it, or whether they're his own 4, there are people who say like, oh no, it is this or that. Like, you don't really know. You're looking at this. We don't know if Bruce is coming up with his own version of the 4, changing one of the 4, or just saying, hey, here are 4 things you need to be good at to not suck at martial arts, right? It's interesting, right? The Chinese one is speed, aggressiveness, accuracy, and heaviness or power. And
now,
Bruce,
which one do you... I prefer the other one for some reason more.
Bruce's or the Chinese one?
The Chinese one.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because the problem is, it's also like saying, well, there's only 4 things you need to be good in techniques or in martial arts. It's a false dichotomy. Either you follow Bruce Lee's 4 or the traditional Chinese 4, and these may not be. These may not be referencing the same thing. When I look at this, I go, when you look at Bruce's flexibility rather than accuracy, and of course, if you read any of Bruce Lee's notes, accuracy was a huge thing for Bruce Lee. He doesn't just put it in you, but that doesn't mean that this is an exhaustive list. Why not make it 5 and add the flexibility? Because flexibility is something you could say adaptability to what your opponent is doing. But now we're talking about a general thing. We're not talking about a specific technique, although technique should also be adaptable. Flexibility in general is like a physical attribute, whereas the other ones are attributes of a specific technique. So then it comes to that dichotomy of, are we talking about techniques or are we talking about the more important, deeper principles and concepts that underlie it? The reason why I hate having this conversation in martial arts is that if you say, hey, let's look at the attributes that make a technique effective, then you have a whole bunch of people like, hey, bro, it's not about techniques. It's
Which
about
we will have right now.
Yeah, it's about the principles that make those techniques work. If you're just talking about techniques, bro, you don't understand martial arts. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But we're also talking about understanding the principles that make things work. Awesome. If you don't understand the principles, if you just talk about techniques, I believe you really don't understand it. But we can also have a discussion about what make techniques effective without going like, without this, like, the people stigmatize any technical discussion by saying, no, bro, it's about the concepts, bro.
That's a whole episode.
I'm not about techniques. And then
Right.
when you start talking about the concepts and principles that make martial arts work, they go, bro, you're being too lofty. You need to talk about the techniques as well. So the thing is, so the thing is, like, this is why I fucking hate talking Chinese martial arts stuff, because everyone is, as the Germans say, they call him a Klugscheißer, a smart shitter. Klugscheißer, a smart shitter. Which is like, you want to talk about techniques, and people say, no, bro, it's about the concepts. You want to talk about concepts, you're like, how can you just talk about concepts without any concrete technical examples? All right, so it's like, it's all this circular bullshit, because everyone wants to sound like a Taoist sage, and no one ever wants to roll up their fucking sleeves and talk about this shit, do the work, right? So if we're talking about the principles of Wing Chun, the concepts, we'll have that conversation. But that doesn't mean we can't also have a conversation of what makes a technique effective. And one of those things that I think makes a technique effective is its adaptability, which is part of the larger scheme of the principles of the martial arts. If we just talk about a rigid technique, and what makes this effective without any discussion of, well, what do you do if your opponent changes when you're using a technique and how do you adapt it? Then it is just a bunch of blah, blah, blah bullshit.
Well, adaptability falls into flexibility. You have to be flexible.
Yeah, but Bruce talks about flexibility specifically in general, like physical flexibility. And then you can say, well, there should also be an adaptability of the technique, which Bruce, and I'm not saying Bruce's entire Jeet Kune Do is about adaptability. It's just in this specific context. And it's why it's so hard to have a conversation about anything, because when it comes to debate and rhetoric, if you want to have a productive discussion, you have to narrow stuff down specifically, because it's so easy to go, let's talk about what makes a Pak Sao work. And then for someone to go, bro, it's not about Pak Sao, it's about the unification of the body with the ground. And then it's like, okay, now we've moved out of the specific and we've gone to the general. This is why we can't have nice things and have discussions. We can have a conversation about the general concepts that make a martial art work, the specific principles that Wing Chun feeds off of, and we can go down to the normal nitty-gritty of techniques. And those are three separate conversations. All right? We can talk about how they all tie in later, but we can have specific conversations without shitting on the principles. We can have conversations about principles without shitting on the technical nitty-gritty. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to The Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. And if you like today's episode, let us know in the comments. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm Seagung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
So, and before we get started, the best way to support us, what is that?
Ice cream truck is coming?
Yo, ice cream truck's coming?
That's a new ice cream song.
What is that? Dre, they're coming for you.
I love them,
It's
baby.
like, it's almost like the music is coming out of the walls. It's like, it's everywhere and nowhere.
Wow.
Okay,
Can't
you know what?
distinguish where it's coming from,
It
right?
might be getting a little hot in here,
It
but I
looks
think
like
we
it's
might have
backyard.
to shut the window, because I don't think this is stopping. I think this is someone's block
It's the
party.
backyard. Yeah, that might be a little backyard party. Yeah, it sounds like.
Really?
Yeah, someone's partying. Okay,
ahead
let's get this podcast done quickly so we can join them.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
So
All right,
we're
give me
closing the
1
window.
second. Yeah, we're closing the
Yeah,
window.
you gotta close that window, and then
get
the
that.
one of the Dre is sweating like a whore in church.
Pedophile and mother cat.
I root.
Dre is sweating like Dre, the STD clinic.
Stupid, man. Stupid.
Okay, sorry. It'll be a 2-take Tommy. Or a multiple take Jake.
An umpteenth take Archibald.
Archibald.
Take Archibald.
Archibald is a
Wow.
crazy
That is a
name.
crazy name.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will not be answering questions from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of shit. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all. will not.
He will not be answering.
The genius will not be answering questions from the Patreons. Okay, shit. That pause. All right.